Wait, here we go. There we go. Okay, do you see that?
Oh gosh, yep.
So this is a baby. This is a human being. This is somebody who couldn't consent to unnecessary surgery. This is a brutal attack on a helpless person. And this happens every day in American hospitals. This is the most sensitive part of a male's body. It's being amputated. In many cases, without anesthetic. Is this what you want for your baby? I mean, to the mothers watching, to the potential future mothers watching, is this what you want your baby to go through? This is what they're talking about when they say, "Oh, do you want a circumcision? Do you want to circumcise him? Shall we do it? Shall we circumcise him today or tomorrow?" This is what they're selling you. Absolute brutal attack on your son. Absolutely unconscionable. This is the worst of American medicine. This is a disgusting attack on a helpless child.
Yeah, for a completely healthy organ that has, mental, emotional, and physical repercussions throughout their entire lives, right? And
most of the sexual sensitivity that a man will have throughout his life is contained in the part that this is being cut off from this boy. It's being amputated. It's been destroyed. It's being killed. Part of this baby is being killed right before your eyes. If that doesn't disgust you, nothing will disgust you. You can't undo it. If you make the mistake in cutting him, you can't uncut him. If he wants to be cut later, he can make that decision for himself, but he can never undo being cut. So have the humility to let him decide what if he wants to have part of his penis removed. He won't, but it's just like, leave it up to him. It's his penis, it's his body, and it's his life. Let him have his life. He's not your property. So that's my advice, is just respect nature, respect your son, and respect his choice.
Between you and me, right where you are right in this moment, is exactly where you were meant to be.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Welcome to the Joygasmic Life Podcast. I am your hostess, Elena Harder, and I am so glad to have you here today. If you are an awakening woman, a conscious mother, a woman on a journey to bring about the best for your family and create an enlightened experience of being a child and a woman and a mother and partner in your world, I absolutely I'm so grateful and so glad that you have found your way here. This podcast collects not only my own personal stories, things I would have done better had I known better, but also the beautiful stories of many hundreds of other women and men who have been through the consciousness awakening journey, who are here to share their stories, to inspire you to know that you can recover from mental health challenges, from postpartum depression, from challenges with traumatic births, and just the life in 21st century, as well as beautiful, actionable tips, exercises where we walk you through practical things that have really helped us, and the journey of becoming a joygasmic mother, one who handles absolutely every challenge with grace and ease, and understands that everything is here to awaken her deeper, to create more empowerment and more pleasure in her life, even the challenging things. So that sounds juicy. Listen up, because we have got a wonderful episode for you today.
Fully harnessing the joygasmic potential of your body and yourself. Anything is possible, and especially we are here to tell you that deep and fulfilling love is possible and is available for you when you choose that for yourself.
Today's interview guest is Harry. Harry is a retired engineer who for many years has struggled to find better ways to do what should be the easiest thing possible, the easiest things imaginable, convince people not to injure their own children. He first joined the Bloodstained Men protest in 2014 and decided then that the on-the-street and online actions of the organization are a promising way to protect kids from genital mutilation. If you've ever had a friend of yours say, well, I'm just going to get him circumcised, and you've held your tongue. If you have had boys who have been circumcised and you're considering whether you should do that for your next child, if you have a man in your life who is promoting circumcision and is pressuring you into doing that, this is the episode for you. I encourage you to listen to this all the way through. It is absolutely a challenging topic, and we talk about some really, really sort of just challenging is the best word to describe this podcast, but I promise it is absolutely worthwhile. It's incredibly important that we have this conversation. As Harry and I talked about in this episode, the root cause of hurt experiences in adult life comes back to our childhood traumas and our childhood woundings. And when we look at the violence in the world, we can absolutely see that the violence done to small babies in their young years, it can be traced back to that root trauma of circumcision. We cover so much in this episode, including some of Harry's experience of finding out he was circumcised, what that was like. We also talk about medical uses for foreskin and the high retail price of foreskin on the medical market. We talk about how you can help educate the women around you, how you can get involved in the Bloodstained Men movement and help educate others. We also talk about the injustice and the unconstitutional nature of circumcision and its comparison with female genital mutilation as a practice in the world. It's a really challenging but beautiful conversation to have, and I want to encourage you to, before you start watching the episode, you can commit to listening to the whole thing, because the first 20 minutes are kind of the hardest bit, and then towards the end we're mostly talking about how we heal from this, what's the process of moving through the healing and the compassion for this. And we talk a lot about compassion and a lot about how to be kind with ourselves on this journey of healing and integration from the very common and very horrific experience called male genital mutilation. Big one, guys. If you have any questions on this podcast or thoughts or ideas, please reach out to me. I will be doing another interview a couple later, and I'm happy to bring on more topics, more experts on this topic. If you would like to share your story about saying no to your partner or your family member about getting your children circumcised, I absolutely want to include some of those stories on the podcast as well. So if you're listening to this and you have a powerful story of claiming your rights as Mama Bear, please reach out and I'm happy to share those. I changed turn it out. Beautiful. Thank you, Harry, so much for joining us today. Welcome to the Joygasmic Life podcast. I'm so grateful to have you here today.
Well, thank you, Elena. It's really great to be with you.
Beautiful. We started to get into some really juicy stuff right off the bat, just even before we started recording, around personal decision making and why I think it's important to bring the conversation of infant circumcision and or adult circumcision to the table. And you were asking about my son, and I think that's a great way to start the episode, because I didn't really think much about penises circumcised or uncircumcised. I'd seen them in my life, but I didn't really think much about personal choice around it until I found out that I had a baby on the way, and I started thinking about those questions. If it's a boy, what will I do? And it took about 30 seconds into a video of the actual procedure for me to go like, no freaking way. Nope,
Right.
nope,
No
nope,
way.
nope, nope.
Good for you. Good for you.
Nope. Not happening. And go ahead.
You saw it. I just want to point out that it's not a personal choice. When you affect somebody else's life permanently, it's not a personal choice. The only person for whom it's a personal choice is the boy himself. If you let him grow up intact, then he can make a personal choice if he chooses to. But it's never a personal choice when you're choosing for someone else. People have a misunderstanding that somehow their child is not a separate human being. The child, from the moment it's born, is a separate human being with human rights. And if you start cutting off healthy body parts, you've violated another person's human rights. You've forced your wishes on someone, and it was never a personal choice. It's really hard for people to grasp that, and it's sort of just embedded in the culture. Well, it's my baby, I can do whatever I want to it. Well, it's a separate life. And if you start damaging that separate life, you can't go back and undo the damage. And so you've got this wonderful gift, this new human being with all the potentials of a new life. And you want to leave that life open to this new human being who has potentials which will go beyond us, beyond our lives. They're going to survive beyond us, and we don't want to cause them harm.
Yeah, in the same way that we look at birth outcomes from home births versus hospital births. We look at birth outcomes, and all mamas are looking for, the best and safest way for their baby to be born into the world. And we all come to that journey from different awareness levels, different experience levels. If you're somebody who's all your relatives have all home birthed, you're going to have a radically different choice and decision-making process than if all your relatives had C-sections. But it's, we're looking for everybody, no matter where they are on that spectrum, is looking for best outcomes for their children.
Right. And this is how circumcision has been, how genital mutilation has been sold to people that never used to practice it, by telling them that they say it's beneficial, which is a complete lie. It's harmful. It's not beneficial, it's harmful.
Let's dive into some of those myths, because there's a lot of misinformation when it comes to circumcision. Reading through some of the Bloodstained Men posts, it sounds like it was kind of an intentional thing from the American Medical Association. My interpretation, I'm a little biased. But, back in 1914, sort of time period where it became more standard practice. Let's talk about some of the history and the myths that people perpetrate about circumcision.
Yeah, so the history goes back to in America, the history goes back to the 19th century, when people did not yet have the germ theory of disease. They did not know what caused disease. And they believed that disease was caused by nervous excitation. And because of that, and because of the sort of Victorian mores of the time, they believed that masturbation caused disease because it excited. And so they would see their child, they would catch their child masturbating, or they would think this is going to cause a disease. Well, it was just quackery.
Hairy palms, right? Hairy palms, falling over.
Yeah.
Like there's all sorts of wild
they've tried to blame. Yeah. Anyway, it was just pure quackery from the 19th century, but it was profitable. And once it was clear that this was quackery, they started to come up with new justifications to keep the gravy train running. And so whatever disease people were most worried about at the time, they would be told that circumcision will prevent it. So they were told circumcision prevents cancer. They were told circumcision prevents venereal disease. They were told that it prevents epilepsy, polio, whatever people were afraid of. They would say, oh, well, circumcision will prevent this. And, anybody in your audience who's not seen a video of a circumcision, we're talking about a brutal, brutal assault on a helpless human being. I mean, I can share some photos if you want on your screen, if your audience is up for that.
I'm like, am I up for it? Let's do it. Like, it's not comfortable. And if anybody doesn't want to see, like, you can close your eyes. We'll let you know when it's done. That's what I do in movies. But yeah, it's important because as far as I understand, they're forcibly retracting the foreskin. It's kind of like pulling back your fingernails, a similar level of like adhesion in the infant. It's meant to separate, the foreskin is meant to separate from the penis somewhere between like 3 and 15, right? Depending on how much play the boy's
Right.
doing with his
Yeah.
penis.
It just generally, it just gradually naturally over time. The body is built this way for a reason. It's like nature knows what it's doing. I mean, I think your
Right?
audience understands that. Why would
Yeah.
you interfere with nature? Why would you cut off a healthy body parts? Why would you traumatize the most vulnerable person at the most vulnerable time in their life? Why would you do that? It makes no sense whatsoever. And yet it's been sold as it's cleaner. It's, there's all these terrible, unconscionable lies. And to gullible, trusting parents, people, you want to trust your doctor, of course, and if you have to depend on people with expert knowledge that you don't have. But when they abuse their trust and they abuse their position to harm
For
for profit,
profit.
and at the
Straight up.
expense of traumatizing, brutalizing, mutilating, permanently damaging the most helpless person of all. I mean, if that isn't unethical, then nothing is unethical.
Which
And
is kind of where the American Medical Association is at today. To be
sadly,
a little brutally honest,
yeah, they have yet to cover themselves in glory on this topic. So far, they've done nothing but covered themselves in shame.
yeah,
And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for the medical profession has done so well during the pandemic, helping people going. I mean, the very best of American medicine we saw on display during the pandemic. People making tremendous sacrifices for the good of others. That is the very best of American medicine, and circumcision is the very worst. So this is an absolute pit of the abyss of abuse and unethical behavior and any profession anybody who tolerates that within their profession should be really take a hard look in the mirror and say, why am I tolerating this? Why have I not spoken up? Because it's way past time you did.
yeah. Yeah, and you sent me some beautiful examples that sort of help make it clearer for people who are considering this for their children or considering not doing this for their children. It's like the mouth would be cleaner with no teeth. And it's like,
Right,
well, yeah, lots of people have cavities. Lots of people have like gum disease issues. Do we take out all their teeth? No. And the stats on disease for penises are actually, I mean, especially if you think about that early infant stage where there's a lot of poop flying around, it's all contained in diapers. You've now got like an open wound in with all of that poop. The baby poop's like relatively sterile, but like it takes time to heal wounds. And we're talking about like a wound that then like scabs and sort of resolves itself over the period of, I'm not really sure, you would be able to tell me, weeks, days?
Yeah, I think it's weeks. And but it's an unnecessary wound. It's like it never had to happen. It would be different if he needed urgent surgery, if he had a tumor and somebody had to, they had to take action. But this is perfectly healthy. There's no diagnosis. There's no disease. There's nothing wrong with him.
Yeah.
Why are you cutting him?
It's like taking breasts off of teenagers when they develop breasts. You're going to get breast cancer later. You're less likely to get breast cancer if we just take your boobs off. No big deal.
Right.
It's like, absolutely a big deal.
I mean, some women make that choice for themselves, and in that case, it is a personal choice.
Yeah.
But I don't have any. I mean, if I hope they're getting good advice. That's all I can say. I hope they're getting the very best advice, and nobody's selling on a procedure that's not necessary. But it's I mean, they are the ones who are affected by that, and but they're an adult, and they can they can withhold their consent or grant their consent. The baby has no chance to express his wishes.
Yeah. So let's do the hard thing that you said and look at those pictures, even though my non-medical self knows I'm going to have to deal with it later. I'm willing to do the hard thing.
Okay, let me see if I can find them for you.
Take your time.
Wait, here we go. There we go. Okay, do you see that?
Oh gosh, yep.
So this is this is a baby. This is a human being. This is somebody who couldn't consent to unnecessary surgery. This is a brutal attack on a helpless person. And this happens every day in American hospitals. This is the most sensitive part of a male's body. It's being amputated. In many cases, without anesthetic. Is this what you want for your baby? I mean, to the mothers watching, to the potential future mothers watching, is this what you want your baby to go through? This is what they're talking about when they say, "Oh, do you want a circumcision? Do you want to circumcise him? Shall we do it? Shall we circumcise him today or tomorrow?" This is what they're selling you. Absolute brutal attack on your son. Absolutely unconscionable. This is the worst of American medicine. This is a disgusting attack on a helpless child.
Yeah, for a completely healthy organ that has, mental, emotional, and physical repercussions throughout their entire lives, right?
And most of the sexual sensitivity that a man will have throughout his life is contained in the part that this is being cut off from this boy. It's being amputated. It's been destroyed. It's being killed. Part of this baby is being killed right before your eyes. If that doesn't disgust you, nothing will disgust you. So I've got more, but I think that's
to look at.
I mean, there are more, but I mean, it breaks your heart. I'm going to stop this. I'm going to turn this off now. There. I mean,
Thanks.
This happens 3,000 times.
Just want to extend a moment of just
healing. Yeah, I mean, just like.
Oh, that was so intense. It's just like so much compassion for all the human beings who have been through that experience before their cognitive centers even really recognized what was going on. Like, just whoa.
And for the mothers who were deceived. I mean, this is an attack on the mother-child relationship as well, because once the boy is traumatized at birth, he can't bond as well to the mother. His breastfeeding is going to be interfered with. And the mother has been tricked into allowing an attack on the baby that she just created. And most mothers don't want that. And if they knew the truth, they would never say yes, because they love their babies. I mean, it's the mother-child relationship is so crucial for the healthy child, for the healthy the child, for the mother, for the whole society. I mean, that love and trust and goodness and nourishment and just connection is the basis of a loving, caring society. And look how we fail as a society over and over again with gun violence and all of the horrible things that have flourished in America. Terrible things. Jim Crow, the mistreatment of minorities, all this violence. Why is it happening? What's the root of it? The genital mutilation, I believe, I mean, I can't say it's everything, but I think it's a huge part of why there's so much violence, so much trouble and trauma in our country. And the sooner we put it behind us, the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah. I mean, when we think about how important that immediate mom-baby bonding is, right? That glory hour, that hour after birth where the body's pumping oxytocin like it's never pumped before, except unless you've given birth once before, right? But for the baby, first time ever, flooding, it's understanding what love means. And often these procedures are performed in that first hour, which means that the bonding of the baby is now bonded or completely truncated, is now bonded to pain, suffering, anguish, loneliness, like trauma. You're just like, what does that do to a person as a human being? Yikes. Yikes. And yeah, I can totally see how that would ripple out into, I think all of the problems facing the world right now are rooted in childhood trauma in some way, shape, or form. When we trace it back, and, if we look at men who don't feel comfortable to speak up for themselves against, other men in authority who are strong arming them, who are doing the wrong things. If we look at, men mistreating women, it's like if they're carrying a high trauma load, it's like hurt people. It's until we undo that root source, it's really hard to undo it as a larger culture. And that's part of why we're having this challenging conversation. Part of why we're like, okay, we're going to look at this, right? Because when you look at it, it goes like, who the heck would do that? Like, why would you do that? So can we dive in a little bit to some of the, like, we talked a little bit about doctors or nurses are pressuring, would you like it today or tomorrow? Can we talk a little bit about the social pressure and what's going on there, and maybe some ways to combat that?
Right. There are, we've heard from young moms who say, no way am I going to cut my son. And the grandmother comes in and tries to force pressure her, or the grandparents do. We hear about that. And you just have to stand your ground. And they don't want to admit that they made a mistake usually. And so,
right.
Plus the older you get, the more set you are in your ways. And, it's like, it's just fact of life. You get more rigid. And so they don't want any change. And so, so that's one big hurdle right there. You've got to say, no, nothing is going to happen to my baby. No one's cutting any part of it, any part of his body off. That's just not going to happen. So end of subject. And hopefully that'll take care of the grandparents. We've heard stories of grandparents actually abducting the child and cutting him on their own. I mean, that's like serious ancestral trauma, right? So when we look at that from a sort of shamanic family constellation trauma, that's like that literally happened to somebody up the family line. It's in the family line, and it's trying to resolve. And every generation it comes forward, and the opportunity's there to resolve it. And literally, as the mother, as the father of this child, my belief is that it's our responsibility to go, dear past wounding, no thank you. We love and accept that you got us to where we are, but we are absolutely not participating in these barbaric rituals, these habits of being, this neglect, this abuse, this like whatever it is, like whatever the pattern is. This is obviously a big one that's like very impactful, and that people feel really strongly about. But whatever it is, it's just like, no, that's not what we're doing in our family. In the same way that like I was never hit as a child, but my parents were, like, we're just saying no. We're just saying like, it's not happening. You break the cycle of abuse. Yeah. I mean, like every other kind of child abuse, often the abused grows up to be an abuser. The only way to stop that is they have to become aware of the issue. They have to become aware. And when they do, then they say, well, no, I don't want to continue this. This is terrible. And we've heard from dads who started out really adamant, oh, my boy's going to look like me. Well, of course you're going to cut my boy. And the mom just talks him out of it and says, if you try that and you're out, I'm going to divorce you if you try that. And eventually the dad comes around and says, wait a minute, this shouldn't have happened to me. I had the right to my own body. I'm missing something that I should have had to enrich my life. And that was that was unfair to me, and I have to grieve that loss, but I'm absolutely not going to let this happen to my son. So it is possible to break the cycle of abuse. It isn't always, you don't always do it on the first pass. You have to, I mean, what I'm saying is that it's going to take often some convincing to turn an adamant dad around and say, no, this is not going to happen, period. And some moms don't have that inner strength, but find it if you can, because it's your boy, it's your child that needs you. Your child's going to need you to stand up for him or her throughout
their whole life.
childhood, and even and later.
Yeah.
And so it's like, get used to it. This is what you signed up for. So, and
Yeah.
you're strong enough.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you have the inner strength. The mom's, with the mama bear, the inner strength is there. It's just tap into
Absolutely.
it. You've got it.
Absolutely. And I see that time and time and again through like all the podcasts. There's like when a woman says like, nope, that's not how it's happening. This is how it's happening. If she sticks to her guns, like I literally interviewed somebody last week and she was like, I need a doula for my birth. I need a doula for my birth. She wasn't in a position to pay for it because she was sort of financially dependent on her partner. But she was like, this is happening. And he literally got her a doula just so she would stop harassing him about it. This works. Yeah. This works. And I was chatting with a lady friend on the beach and I was like, I'm going to go do this interview about circumcision. And she's like, pro or con? I'm like, against, clearly. Like, and then we got into this little chat and she's like, yeah, my ex-partner, who was a bit of a, not the greatest guy from some other stories she told me, but there's reasons she's not with him anymore. But he had been pro circumcision, and he said it's just like getting your ears pierced. Like, I remember getting my ears pierced. It took weeks for them to heal. They got infected a couple times. It was pretty challenging. It's like a tiny hole. We're talking about a radically different type of procedure. It's not like just getting your ears pierced. And what she said to him was, okay, well, I'll express milk. You bottle feed, and you take care of all the baby minding while it's healing. You take care of all the diaper changing, all the wound cleaning. If you really want to do it, you have to book the appointment. I'll go to the appointment. I won't necessarily agree to the thing, but I'll go and have the conversation about it. She's like, she was willing to meet him if he was willing to stand up for what he believed. And he just didn't, so their son is now 12 and intact because mom was like, I'm sticking to my guns. Like, if you want this to happen, if you really need this to happen, you make it happen. And he just wasn't the kind of guy to make that happen, which I think in a lot of cases, it's like, moms are these like caretakers. Like, dads are great and they do take care and they help hold the family unit, absolutely. But like, moms are the one who literally have infant in arms, who literally have to go, I'm going to take this infant, I'm going to put it in somebody else's arms, and then let them like put all my trust that they're doing the right thing for my child. And all you have to do is literally just not let go. Just literally keep holding on. Just go like, nope, not on my watch. Baby's down here. Like, no freaking way, man. Got it. Like, and Mama Bear will do that. It's a little like silly, but like we do that anyways on numerous other things. So this is a really important one.
And while you're if you have a hospital delivery, while you're in the hospital, the baby is at risk the whole time. Even if you've said no circumcision, they'll sometimes just take them and cut them and say, oh, we thought you wanted it. So you have to be there. Somebody has to be there minding that child, that boy, the baby, for the whole time he's in the hospital. Get him. American hospitals are not safe for boys. They're unsafe. It's a war zone in a hospital as far as the foreskins go. And they are there to, in most cases, they're there to collect their profit by mutilating that boy. And they'll do anything they can to do it. And even if it means saying, oh, I misread the form. Or we've also heard that they give the mother, while she's on painkillers, a stack of forms to sign.
Knocked out.
Buried in it is the circumcision consent form. And she's not, and we've heard stories.
She's not in right mind.
One story that was famous, the mother was a lawyer, and she said, listen, I'm not competent to make this decision right now. To her husband, you've got to do this for me. And he looked at the form, he said, no, I'm not going to agree to that. And the boys grew up, both of his sons grew up intact because of just that moment of realizing, well, no, why would I do that? And it was just because the mom was a lawyer and she knew that, you can't make that kind of decision when your capacity is impaired. And even though she didn't really have a strong understanding of the harm of circumcision, she just knew that it was a big decision that she shouldn't be making when that didn't have her full capacity to understand.
Let's talk a little bit about foreskin as a medical product. I've been wondering this for a while, and you can either confirm or say whatever you have to share on it. But I heard they sell them to the beauty industry for stem cells or something of the sort. Tell me more about
Right.
that, because it just makes my skin curl, and I'd love more information so I can yammer at people on the beach about it.
You can buy human foreskin fibroblasts online. You can search for them and buy them online. They are cultured cells from stolen foreskins. They came from an infant who did not consent to the removal of his body part and it's absolutely unethical to be selling human body parts stolen from live human beings without their consent. This is utterly unethical, but it's happening. They make artificial cultured skin products from these cells, and one cell can grow a disc about 3 inches in diameter of artificial skin, which sells for, as I recall, it's hundreds of dollars, and there are many, many, many of these discs that can be made from one's foreskin. So the street value in the final product is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So this is the profit motive. So they're highly motivated to grab these foreskins. They've also been used in this cultured skin. These cultured foreskin cells have been used in a beauty cream sold to wealthy women. It's very expensive, and it's been promoted on the Oprah show. It's been promoted by celebrities. Of course, Oprah didn't get to be one of the richest people in the world by doing this stuff for free. Somebody's she's getting paid for what she does. She's promoting whatever she's one of the world's greatest salesman. And she's selling this stuff, or she did, and she never backed down. Protesters showed up when she came at her appearances sometimes, and she never said, "I made a mistake. I was misinformed. I shouldn't have done this." And what she did was absolutely unethical and a huge blot on her career, on her name and her career, which she has not resolved. And other celebrities have done the same thing. I don't remember which ones, but they're movie stars that are well known. I don't want to name the wrong one, but people that should have known better. Somebody should advise them. Someone said, you don't. This is like getting in bed with the Nazis. You don't want to do this. This is going to ruin your reputation. You've built a reputation as a good human being. Don't screw it up. Don't have anything to do with this stuff. But they're not getting good advice, and they are, I assume, profiting from it. And it's just terrible, just terrible.
I was kind of hoping you would tell me it wasn't actually true, but okay, now I've got my facts straight, and it's like baby foreskin, skin cream, skin grafts for other medical purposes of who knows what. Just whoa. And yeah, I mean, like you said, American medical industry at its worst, right? That's profit-driven medicine, not care-based medicine at its worst.
Stolen body parts. I mean, this is organ theft. This is absolutely organ theft happening in not a third world country, in the United States of America, in American hospitals, and nothing has been done about it.
Promoted as a health benefit,
and
to
a beauty benefit for wealthy older women, so that they can look young by stealing foreskins from babies. I mean, if that's not a corrupt society, I mean, if that isn't an indication of deep corruption in our society, I don't know what is. That's as corrupt as it can get. And we've got to do better. We've got to do better. We have an obligation to do better.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of why I'm interviewing you. And then later in the season, we'll have Brother Kay on. I think I'm interviewing him in November of this
wonderful,
year.
Wonderful.
And I'll see, it's I'm going to make this a topic because sexual literacy, sexual fulfillment is one of my passions. And, let's talk a bit about the sexual implications of the removal of the foreskin for the boy when he's coming into puberty or, as an older man who's like, oh, like maybe a lady's sending him this podcast and going like, you shouldn't circumcise our son. And then he kind of has to deal with what's happened to him. Those are two different topics. Let's talk first about, sorry, my brain. Let's talk first about the sexual implications.
Right. So the most sensitive part of the penis is the foreskin. That's where most of the sexual pleasure sensors are. And there are thousands of fine touch receptors in the foreskin. The highest concentration in the male body is in the ridged band, the circular tip of the foreskin. So that is it's like, well, you wouldn't cut out half of your child's retina. You know that's something he needs. You wouldn't do that to him. You wouldn't
cut off half a finger,
right? And in terms of the loss of sense receptors, touch receptors, it would be like slicing off all of his fingertips. They're cutting off all of his fingertips, saying, well, you don't get those touch receptors. We're taking those from you. It's so monstrous that it takes your breath away. Obviously you don't want to do that. Obviously a man who has his full capacities that nature endowed him with is better off than a man who's dealing with a reduced set of sexual capacity.
Sexual sensory capacity, right? And if we think about, like, from the women I've talked to, one of the biggest complaints is he's not so sensitive to my needs, right? There's literally like those words, like, just wish he was more sensitive to the connection in bed or to the experience in bed. And I've thought about this, and it's like, well, I mean, literally, we can compare this and go like, okay, if you were trying to get feedback on what was happening with your fingers and they didn't have the nerves there, you would press a lot harder. You would be a lot more forceful to get that understanding. And so, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but this directly points to sort of that like really intense pornography style, like hump, 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 like sex, versus what a lot of women are asking for, which is a slower, more like sensuous, sort of slow and aware of all those nerve endings kind of journey. So we literally have almost like one gender's on like normal speed and the other gender's on like 3x, trying to like three times faster, and they're trying to communicate. We have something like that going on because of the difference in the nerve receptors. I think there's a level of like compassion towards the men for obviously like they've been raised on pornography, they've had their foreskins removed, they haven't necessarily been initiated into how to be with a woman, which was a traditional thing in many, many ancient cultures. Like the older women would welcome the teenage boys and be like, hey boys, like, here's how it's done. And then they would then pass those boys to the young ladies, who were like, oh, okay. Like, and it would be a much more pleasurable experience, right? It's like, oh, this is how it goes. So there's like literally like a sense receptor sort of like challenge because of that experience. What do you think about sort of, because there's also in like penis culture, there's this like, am I big enough? Is my penis good enough? Do you think that relates to the circumcision experience as well?
I do. I think, if you've been traumatized and you're missing a body part, you're going to feel like you're going to have feelings of inadequacy. I mean, it's a tragedy. I mean, it hurts everybody. It hurts him. He's got to go through life and become aware of what happened to him, hopefully, and then overcome that and grieve and somehow function again. And it's just a tragedy, and that the woman it's harmed by it too, because she's got this jackhammer for a partner who it's not working. It's going to hurt her.
I've been on the receiving end of that. It's not fun.
It's not good. Not good.
Not fun.
So, everybody loses. And the other thing is, there is the pleasure bond between the mates, between the sexual partners. And when one person isn't getting the full complement of pleasure, that has to impact the pleasure bond, which is essential for the bonding and successful long relationship. I mean, most people want to have an enduring relationship. If that bond is damaged because the actual machinery to enact it is damaged, then then the relationship has this has an impact that and we want loving relationships. This is like everybody wins when there's these loving relationships. It's not hard. We want that. It's good for everyone. So,
and when you're having incredible sex, like, you want to stay together. Like, people will put up with all sorts of other relationships shit if their sex life is good. People will stay in relationships they don't even think have a future if the sex life is good. Like, it's there to bond us. It's there to, like, bring us, deeply together. And you're saying it's kind of like this. It's kind of like we're trying to, like, do this, like, deep connection where all of our nerves are entangled, and we've got this situation where it's like literally a fist, right? Going, like, we're trying to connect, and it's like, I can't figure out how. And then we're wondering why the marriage rates are the way they are. We're wondering why so many couples break up in the first year of their relationships. We're wondering why, there's so many things that are tied back to that. Is there anything else in terms of, like, sexual functioning challenge or whatever, or experience that you think is important that we touch on?
Well, the other thing is that when men masturbate, the foreskin provides a natural lubrication, so they don't need lubrication to do that. So the boy is, when he's in his teenage years, and is probably masturbating mostly, he is he just has a better equipped to enjoy his body. It's like he had the right. Every boy had the right to have the full thing, and to take it away is it's just another little it's another impact that even something like masturbation, it impacts his own experience of himself. And I think when he learns to love himself, he's in a better position to love his partner when the time comes for him to have a partner. So the damage just is compounding. It's astounding and compounding. And it should be easier to talk people into leaving their kids intact, but it's surprising how strong the indoctrination is to gut boys in America.
Look at that word,
indoctrination.
Like, let's just indoctrination. Let's just think about that for a second. Like, you were going to say in America.
And in other countries, they do it to girls, and they're just as indoctrinated. They do. And
I watched a video on the Bloodstained Men page, and I was just like, I literally couldn't finish it because she was talking about, like, this, like, slice with this, like, big knife, and her grandma brought her and tricked her into going, and I was just like, whoa, dude! Like, I love my clitoris so much. I can't imagine living without it. Like, that would be so sad, but also like so common it's like relatively common around the world, and, like, also equally, like, affecting men in North America.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we need to always remind ourselves is something can be both monstrous and commonplace. Just because it's done a lot doesn't mean it isn't monstrous. In our own history, we had slavery for 400 years or something. Absolutely monstrous abuse of human beings. But it was so commonplace that in the areas where it was practiced, it took a civil war to put an end to it. I mean, it should have been obvious to everybody, this is not what we want to do. But because it's commonplace, you don't see that it's monstrous. And during the Holocaust, the people who were participating in that, it was just day-to-day work for them, but what they were doing was absolutely monstrous. And Jim Crow and all of the terrible things that have been done to racial minorities, when it's commonplace, you don't see how monstrous it is. And circumcision is one more thing. It's we don't see how bad it is because it's commonplace. It's hard to wrap your mind around that something can be widely practiced and utterly evil.
Yeah. And I mean, I think like in my personal experience, I think probably like 30% circumcised, like 70% circumcised in my personal sort of experience of sexuality with people. And it's like, wow, like that's a lot, you know? And when I think about that group of men who were uncircumcised, like there was an incredible like G-spot orgasm experience that I had after his orgasm that like I'd never experienced anything like that. And he had one of the smaller penises I'd ever been with. And I was like, whoa, you got something magical going on here, dude. Like what is that? What is this? You know? And by and large, they were, if I look at them as a group compared to the other group, they were more tender as lovers. They were more considerate. They were, you know, the sex was maybe just like inherently like a little bit gentler and better. Like the sensation was more rich. And it's like, whew, wow. Like with all of that input, it's like just the whole thing. Like if people are still listening and they're still curious about whether they should do this or not, like we just like double check and triple check that, because, you know, you clearly want one thing and there's other parts that are maybe in the way. So then it's just a matter of removing those other parts that are in the way of what you want. Harry, I'd love to hear from you, you know, sort of, you're obviously really active in the Bloodstained Men group. You've been to a couple of protests and whatnot. You obviously have your own story in that. Can you share a little bit about what that journey of sort of realizing that you had been circumcised, realizing that it was something that, you know, something that you think should not happen to anybody, and then your healing journey from that? Because I think that's really important for men to hear, you know, like what's that journey like?
Yeah, when I was 16, I realized that I'd heard about circumcision, but I didn't know what it was, because all the boys were circumcised around me. So I thought, well, that's just the way that I didn't know any different. So
yeah.
When I heard about it, I thought that must mean they cut off the head of the penis. And I thought, oh God, I'm so glad they didn't do that to me. And eventually I realized, oh, wait a minute, there's this scar here. They really did cut off something from my body. And then I had to find out all about it. And I tried to talk to my parents, and they didn't, my mother didn't want to talk about it. She was, I could tell she just couldn't talk about it. I don't know if I don't know what happened when I was circumcised, but whether it was a bad, whether there were complications or not, but she was really hurting when I brought the subject up. So I had to find it out on my own. And it just was so obvious to me that all the reasons they're giving for this are lies. You don't have to be really smart to figure this out. These are lies. This doesn't hold water. Their arguments just don't hold water. And the idea of throwing away a healthy body part and damaging somebody's penis, I mean, this just goes against everything that I was taught about ethics and what's right. And I was just shocked, and I lost respect for my parents. I just thought, well, you know, you guys failed me, and you know, you guys were incompetent. You didn't protect me when I needed you. And it just changed my attitude towards my parents. I never again saw them with the same innocent eyes that I had prior. And I just
and
saw
you were
them
like
as
16 when this happened?
I was like, oh yeah, I have to just sort of like grow up now. And anyway, I knew it was wrong. There was just so clear that there wasn't any question about it. And until I didn't have a way to communicate with people much until the internet came along, and I could find other people who understood this the way I did. And then I understood there are plenty of men who understand that they and are angry about what was done to them, and eventually I found the bloodstained men who were protesting. At that time, the CDC or the American Academy of Pediatrics had released a paper that was very pro-circumcision and very biased. It was criticized by leading European pediatricians. I mean, the top pediatricians from 38 countries criticized the stance of the American Pediatric Association, and that just doesn't happen in the developed world normally, where
No.
there's a complete disagreement about what's acceptable and not what isn't. So that started the Bloodstained Men protests, and they went to the American Academy of Pediatrics meetings, and they still do. Though they're going to be there in Philadelphia this year when they have their meeting. And it's a long story of lies, deceit, absolute unethical behavior by professionals, abuse of power, abuse of prestige, regulatory capture, academic capture, all of these things that are rooted in corruption. It's just so corrupt that this is happening and that the victims are helpless. And to my mind, getting out on the street and protesting is one way to first of all make it clear that we're not happy that this was done to us, so that people know that it's not like, oh, we're so glad we're circumcised. No, we're not. We understand we were harmed and we're not happy about it, and there was no good reason for it. And to force the doctors to see that what they're doing is there's effects that their people are trying to hold them to account, and they can't just get away with this without any kind of repercussions.
Yeah,
and it's to educate the public, because people come by and they see us and they say, "Oh, we didn't understand it was such a bad thing. When our boy comes, we're not gonna cut him." So it also educates the public. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I'm so glad I've seen, I went on your Facebook page. There's a great, if anybody's looking for more resources, that's an incredible place to go in terms of articles and just sort of stories and anecdotes of like things. And then also the imagery of the protest is very vivid. It's this all white costume with like a blood-stained crotch. You're just like you can't help but like be curious and ask what's going on. So I just like props to you guys for like a very audacious costume and very audacious work. I just want to bring it back. To this journey of like healing that. So you said that at some point, it sounds like probably decades later from your, sort of 16-year-old experience, the internet came and you now had access to other people and men who were talking about this. What was that initial sort of experience like of starting to talk about it? Like what feelings came up, what words or ideas came up in that time for you?
I was really angry. I was really, really angry. And I still carry a lot of that anger today, but I was really angry at the injustice of it. And the hypocrisy and, as I said, the abuse of power. At the same time, the female genital mutilation bill was being discussed in the Congress. This is like 1996.
Okay.
And, there were a group of men who said, this has to be gender neutral. We've got to protect both genders. It's genital mutilation is genital mutilation no matter who the victim is. And everybody has the right to their own body. This is just basic human rights, the most basic human right of all, the right to your own body. And so there was lobbying to influence that bill, but it was unsuccessful. So the FGM bill still is in place. It was recently strengthened after a challenge by a court. And everything about it is right, except one thing. It's not gender neutral. It doesn't provide equal protection under the law. In that sense, it's unconstitutional.
And in North America, the issue is male genital mutilation more than female genital mutilation, partially because of that legislation, but also because of the cultural practice, right?
Right. So the law was challenged a few years ago, I think 2016, by a Muslim group in Detroit. They had circumcised or mutilated the genitals of 100 girls, and the person doing this was brought to trial. And in their defense, they got high-powered attorneys to say that the law was unconstitutional on a weird technicality that I'm not a lawyer, but didn't make any sense to me, but apparently it flew. After that, the Congress strengthened the law so that technicality wouldn't apply anymore. So that law is again in effect, but it's like it's hard to, I mean, you've got this problem that's like 0.5% or less is female, 99.9% is male, but we're going to protect females. I mean, the females should be protected, don't get me wrong, but the real problem is over here, guys. And the level of disconnect is just shocking. And it just never ceases to amaze me.
So, once you'd worked through sort of that initial anger, because obviously you're like talking about it very passionately, and it's like this is now part of your life's mission is to continue to resolve this and prevent this from happening with other people. Just like for me, it's like mental health postpartum for moms. Like, I know what the hellish version of that looks like. I want to make sure that doesn't happen for other people. We want to solve the problems that we suffered through. What's your vision for, the future? Like, what would your ideal situation be? And then what's sort of like a reasonable expectation based on what you've seen? Fortunately, they're probably different.
Honestly, I find that every time I try to predict the future, I'm woefully off. So I don't know what's going to happen. I do believe that at some point the FGM law has to be challenged as unconstitutional because it doesn't provide equal protection, which is fundamental. It's in our Constitution. Boys have the same right to their own bodies as girls do. And it's just, at some point, I think moms are going to realize that we don't want to throw our sons under the bus. We don't want to say they're expendable. We don't want to say that. But that's not what we want. I think it's the mothers who have the real influence more than anyone, because they know they have to defend their children. It's their first duty as a mom is to defend your child. And they know that. It's just written in the DNA. It's part of what it means to be a mom. So I think the moms are going to be, and young moms already are just amazing, fierce advocates. I think they're going to have more effect than the men who were harmed will have. But men who were harmed, like myself, we need to keep rattling the cage and saying, no, this was not something we wanted, and we're not happy about it. And it was violated our rights. It violated our bodies. It damaged us for life. We're not happy about this, and stop doing it to boys. This is outrageous that this continues. So we all have to be raising our voices. It's not like nobody gets to go quiet on this. We all have to say, this is intolerable. We're not going to put up with it anymore.
Yeah, that's literally part of why we're here. Because I was like, if I can, and it's interesting because you said from a female perspective, there's this little bit of people listen to like older men more than they listen to young women. But in this case, you're saying actually it's probably that childbirthing generation that really has the ability to change this for their families. Obviously, we absolutely have the ability to change it for our personal family. But what I'm getting from this whole call is this is actually such a big deal that it's something you can be loud and vocal about. If a friend's sort of pregnant with a baby and they're thinking about circumcision, you can give them the facts, you can talk to them about it, you can refer them to some information, you can give them some of those metaphors and examples. We're not going to take their fingernails off, we wouldn't cut whole ears off, we wouldn't take whole arms worth of nerve endings off, we wouldn't, and giving voice to sort of those challenging stories from the older men who have had time to process and work through this to a certain degree so they can actually talk about it. Whereas we need to recognize that like most of the men in North America who have been through this process are in some form of denial, right? In that grief spectrum, they're in the denial phase. Right. I'm fine. Or like your pre-16-year-old self, like, well, everybody's penis looks like this, so why is it a big deal? Or something like that, right? And it's like, well, when we can talk to people, when we can be the advocates and speak up on behalf, if somebody's questioning whether this is a thing they should do, instead of just going like, oh, their baby, their decision, actually go like, this could be really harmful. This could be really, not could be. This is really harmful. This is really challenging. It's really common, but also graphically horrific and terrible for the infant. If you have a choice, just say no. Say no, just don't do it, right. And unfortunately, like you were saying, some women don't have a choice because they're knocked out and it happens anyway. There's a whole, I think, grief process for moms to go through there. And if anybody's in that process and wants to chat with me, like, absolutely. I think if any man is listening to this episode, like, chatting with Harry or reaching out to bloodstained men and having this communication and this idea that like we're working with it together to really come to a place of peace and understanding with what is, because we can wish our whole lives to go back and change what happened to us in the past or what we permitted in the past. Whether you're on the mom or the son side of that spectrum, like we can wish we could change it, but the way we can change it in the present moment is to work with how our attachments are to that, whether we're still holding those resentments, anger, fear, rage, vengeance. I would imagine vengeance might come up in that one, or this distrust of parents that you talked about, like whatever those emotions are that are coming through, we really need to work to let go of the immediate emotional charge. We can keep the wisdom, we can keep the new understanding, we can move forward with new action. But when we're able to sort of change the way we're relating to that trauma point, then we can have a more powerful voice moving forward. And that's regardless of whether you're like a mom who just didn't know better or whether you're a baby who wasn't given a choice. It's like coming to forgiveness in the moment, coming to compassion and to loving understanding in the moment is what will bring you the inner peace to be able to then move out of those anger, rage sort of spectrums and start to move into like, okay, well, what does my sexuality look like from here? How can I learn to be more sensitive? How can I learn to appreciate what I have and to be with what I have? Like you said, well, they didn't cut the top of my penis off. And like, that literally was a practice in the past. Like eunuchs was like, if you wanted to serve the emperor, they would chop your penis off so that you wouldn't have sex with any of the harem. And it's like, we're not that far, right? But we're not doing it. So there's work that needs to happen there. And I think the gratitude for like, I have this much of my penis still here, beautiful. As a partner of somebody who's been circumcised, it's like, I'm so grateful for the penis that's in my life, regardless of its situation in reference to circumcision, because there's literally nothing that I personally can do about it at this point other than time travel. And trust me, I'm working on that one, but that's a different podcast. Yeah.
There is foreskin restoration techniques that apparently there's been 100,000 foreskin restoration devices sold in America. So 100,000 American cut men have tried to remedy the situation for themselves. And they do have varying success. Some are very successful in restructuring they don't get the nerve endings back, but they do get some of the skin back. Others have tried for years and aren't very successful. It just depends. Because it depends on how much damage was done, how much they cut, and also the skin, how flexible and how expandable the skin they have is, the remaining skin. And there's a lot of factors there, but it is something for cut men. It is one way to sort of get some control over the situation. And
it's an action you can take.
Yeah. And as long as you don't set expectations unrealistically high, it's worth doing. And also what of the men who've attempted foreskin restoration, and some have succeeded that I've spoken to, none of them regrets what they've done, their foreskin restoration work. None of them say, "Oh, I wish I didn't do that." They all are glad they did. So there is that, and it doesn't really undo the damage. I mean, one thing to young parents, I don't like to talk about it much, because then they think, well, he can just fix it later. Well, no, he's not really fixing it later. You have to not do it in the first place. But
we're talking something similar to like when you see people who have stretched their earlobes out, right? They've literally like stretched the skin. We're talking about doing a totally different but similar process with the foreskin. It's like correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like a weighted object that sort of pulls and holds the foreskin and pulls it down throughout the day.
Yeah, there are a few different things. Some have rubber bands, some have weights, and it's it's for cut men who understand they've been harmed. It's something worth pursuing. Yeah.
But like you said, it's not regrowing the nerves. It's just sort of it's a cosmetic experience, and maybe you regain some of the sensitivity because it's no longer exposed in the same way. So you have this like open closed sort of experience, which would change the way your brain is mapping the nerves, but not regrowing the nerves, not undoing that initial trauma and the initial bonding experience. Just, gosh.
It's been described as the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. Foreskin restoration is the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. Well, it's good that there's an ambulance there, but don't fall off the cliff in the first place.
Right. Oh, yeah. Is there anything else that you really wanted to touch on in our conversation today?
I'm just really glad I had a chance to talk to you, Elena. It's just been a real pleasure. Your heart is in the right place, and you're doing awesome work. And I just feel so honored to have a chance to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's been like eye-opening, and I don't know if I'll ever get that picture you showed me out of my brain, but it will fuel me. It will absolutely fuel me, because I know what my son's intact penis looks like, and I know what my partner's not intact penis looks like. And if I could redo the history of the world, I would just get rid of circumcision. Just like, whoosh, didn't exist. Whoosh, never happened. Yes. And you know what? Like, the world would be a place living in harmony and beauty, probably, because we have a lot less going on at each other, a lot less of that anger you were talking about, right? In the world.
I'm pretty sure that's true, that it just less trauma means happier people. It's not that hard. So
yeah. Gosh. Oh, okay. If people want to reach out, if they need support, if they want resources, if they're looking for connection in that way, what are the best places for them to reach out for that? To Bloodstained Men or yourself?
We always recommend they come to bloodstainedmen.com. Our page has a lot of links. Also, if you really want to hear directly, we have a link to it, but if you want to go directly to what doctors who are opposing circumcision say, doctorsopposingcircumcision.org they have an excellent website. They've got great resources. These are authorities. If you trust authorities, these are authorities who are ethical and will tell you the truth. And, God bless them. They were going up against their profession, and they're doing a great job. So bloodstainedmen.com, doctorsopposingcircumcision.org. And there's a group on Facebook called Your Whole Baby, which is for moms. And they do a great job of educating moms about protecting their boys.
Wonderful.
I recommend all those.
Wonderful. Yeah, beautiful. And if people are going to bloodstainedmen.com, are there resources for healing, meeting up with other people, participating in protests, education, all that stuff?
We have all that stuff, education, the upcoming protests. For men or anybody who wants to join the protest, a lot of moms and come out with their kids. They're real family friendly. They're not like, you see from protests are really scary. Ours are not scary. There are lots of moms and kids and nice people everywhere. They're all nice people. And if you want to come out to one of our protests, we'd love to have you. Just we'll give you a sign and you can express. Yeah. So we're very open to participations.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Oh, if you had like a little word of wisdom for moms who were, on the fence or sort of still thinking about this, what would that be?
You can't undo it. If you make the mistake in cutting him, you can't uncut him. If he wants to be cut later, he can make that decision for himself, but he can never undo being cut. So you're have the humility to let him decide what if he wants to have part of his penis removed. He won't, but it's just like leave it up to him. It's his penis, it's his body, and it's his life. Let him have his life. He's not your property. So that's my advice: is just respect nature, respect your son, and respect his choice to, if he wants to do something to his body, let him make that choice himself.
Yeah, beautiful, good wisdom. And if you had any words for men, young or old, who are coming into the realization of this genital mutilation that's happened to them, to give them some hope or some camaraderie on that journey, what would those words be?
Find people who understand it the way you do. So, I mean, we'd love it if you join a Bloodstained Men protest, or at least reach out to us, or and look up foreskin restoration and see if you can start that process. It's a hard realization. It's just, there's a sense of betrayal, and there's loss and violation, and it's a very hard thing it's hard to come out of denial, because what you end up with is a lot of hurt, but you kind of have to. It's like you can't live in fantasy land forever.
Yeah, and I think especially if something's not quite functioning in your relationships, or if you're having a hard time maintaining a relationship, or if you're having a hard time with your sexual function or your sexual enjoyment, or if your partner's complaining about their sexual enjoyment, like all of those are sort of places where you go like, maybe I should look at this. Maybe there is something in there, because all of those things point to that root wound. All of those point to the experience of being, of having that experience in that way. This has been such a, just talking with you, it's like, wow. I'm so glad that I made the decision I made for my son. I feel like so free in some ways. I'm just like, la la, didn't do it, la la, like clean hands or something like that. It's just like, thank God, I'm not having. I mean, I don't actually think I would probably show up to have this interview with you if I hadn't at least chosen to have one of my children intact, right? Yeah. Because the combo of the guilt, shame plus wounding from the man, would just create a really, there's lots of examples of explosive conversations on the internet about circumcision. It's a banned topic in a lot of mom groups. It's, it causes a lot of division.
But and as much as you're proud of making the right decision, you've got to always bring up the compassion for those women who didn't.
Yeah.
And the regret moms, just, treat them with kindness. All you can do is be kind, and they're hurting too. So, I'm so glad you have a happy story, but for all those who have an unhappy story, we got to show compassion.
Yeah. Lots of feelings, and compassion, I think is at the root of it. That's where we can understand each other. That's where it comes together and it doesn't hurt. It's like something wrong has happened. It was incredibly common, and we're still working to undo that. And it's sort of it's really twisted up in a lot of trauma from both sides. And so to undo it is really takes patience, time, compassion, kindness. yeah, and I didn't mean to be like, I mean, I was very happy in that moment. I was trying to go like,
Yeah, I
wow,
mean,
like,
you know, I would be too if I were you. I mean, I would be really happy about having had made the right choice. It's something that it is something to be happy about. Definitely.
yeah, yeah, but I think you pointed to it as like, just because I'm in that situation doesn't mean that other moms are not in the other situation. Lots of men in the other situation where it's like, yeah, but no, we have to deal with this. What is that? What is that like?
And there's some moms who are adamant that they won't admit that they made a mistake. They just can't. And even then, for them, is still compassion is the answer. You can't. They're not ready to see what they're just not ready to see it, and you can't force their eyes open. If you got to wait till they open their own eyes. So it doesn't really help to attack people in that mode. It's not really helpful. So, and I've done it. I mean, I've lost my cool. I've just gone off on people, and I always regret it. It's like it's like no matter how difficult it is to reach people, it doesn't help to start yelling at them. So
usually it's the opposite of reaching them if you're yelling. But also, I understand it's like it's a challenging topic. Somebody's fighting for something that you have experienced as an incredible challenge in your life. It's kind of, I hope this isn't a crude metaphor, but like it's kind of like somebody got in an accident and lost their legs, and somebody's like arguing for the goodness of having had their legs chopped off.
Like,
and being like, no, absolutely, we should amputate people. Absolutely. Yeah. Even if there wasn't a real good reason for it. No, we need it. You know, it's like, oh, I'm so sorry for your experiences of having to deal with those ladies who are just, it's just like blinders on, right? Everybody's the product of their environment and their upbringing. So, you know, mine looks like this and theirs looks like this. Can't even see the same thing. Go ahead. Yeah. Thanks for sitting with it. It's big stuff to sit with, and like, thanks for sitting with me. I've never had a conversation like this before. I thought about once, like 10 years ago, and was like, no, I'm good. No, did my decision making. I'm all done. Don't need to think about it. And you sit with this every day.
It's been, well, sometimes I just have to take a break from it because it is dark and it is painful, and it's like you don't want to overextend your emotional strength, and sometimes I just have to think, okay, I'm not going to deal with this stuff for a while. I just can't, and I'm gonna walk in the forest. I'm gonna do something else because this is just too dark. And so, but yeah, I'm happy I have a chance to contribute something to your discussion with your audience.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Just so much gratitude. My personal compassion from my heart to your penis.
Thank you.
It's a bit of a strange thing to say, but straight up, just oh yeah. Yeah, it's just sexual healing on the planet needs to happen, and it happens with vulnerable and challenging conversations like this. So I'm super grateful for you sharing that with me, being a part of the journey.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just, if you have anything else you wanted to share before I stop the recording, let me know.
I think we covered it. I think I'm out of material. So yeah. Okay. Take care.
Yeah. Well, that was a really incredible episode and kind of a really big deal. I just wanted to give a shout out to Harry, Brother Kay, and the Bloodstained Men Project for their tireless work to bring this to fruition. If you have a man in your life who think you could use their resources, please connect them. And if you have a young mom in your life who's expecting a boy, please let her know about the things you've learned here today. Please find your inner mama bear and protect other women's babies Obviously, you can respect everybody's boundaries and rights wherever they're at, but also this is something that really impacts people's lives moving forward, and it is something that is a crime of silence and of misunderstanding. And so if we can bring facts and figures and light to this, we can really do a lot to transforming the next generation of men into one that is more loving, more kind, and more beautiful lovers. And we want that for our girls. So, and we want that for our boys. We want them to have happy and fulfilling sex lives. So please be a part of that movement, and please speak up in your own family and in your community. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end.
How easily can you imagine that this experience is integrated already deeply into every cell of your being in such a way that you will begin to notice that you have already been operating from this new behavior for a while, and that it was simply a matter of noticing how much you've already been doing this. You may choose to feel that this moment is the moment that completely and utterly into your body. Or in the days and weeks ahead, getting curious about how fully and completely this experience has transformed your life, realizing that you are at complete choice to choose how you would like to integrate this information into every cell of your being.
Thank you so much for being a part of the Joygasmic Life podcast, and I am so grateful to have you here and be a part of it. If you haven't already, head over to joygasm.me to check out our Joygasmic Birth Blueprint ebook and course, which give you all of the information that you need to become a Joygasmic mama, whether you are postpartum or whether you're expecting your first baby. This course absolutely has tips and tricks for you that will help prepare you for birth, prepare you for the birth of your next child, and prepare you for peaceful and joygasmic mothering on the other side. So absolutely, the way that we do one thing is the way that we do everything. And so by utilizing and beginning to build a practice of joygasmic alchemy, you will absolutely become a better mother and hold space, as I am and as many, many women are, for the enlightenment of the planet. We do that first by working on ourselves and then offering that support and that enlightened nature within ourselves to our families. And then from there, it ripples out. So if you haven't already checked that out, go check that out now. Again, it's joygasm.me. We've also got courses on rescuing your relationship, bulletproof mom, how to be able to handle even the most intense toddler or special needs child later on in life, as well as a multitude of new courses that are coming out. We're absolutely grateful to get to have you as a part of that. And remember, anyone who participates in the funding of the podcast absolutely gets a membership access, which allows you to access the bonus features, the ends of some of our episodes, exercises from our guests, as well as featured free content from them. So super glad to have all of you who are a part of that already here. And thank you so much for being a part of the Joygasmic Life family. If I could leave you with only one tip for how to be an orgasmic, joygasmic mama in this world, the invite would be to really step into and embody the knowledge that you are actually here for a reason, and that reason is to be an enlightened being for your family. They chose you for a reason. They chose you on this consciousness journey for a reason. And you absolutely have the tools and skills to be able to do this. If you're struggling, please reach out. I am more than happy to help people rewire what's going on in their brain, create a new story, and create a more powerful experience so you can be the kind of mama for your kids that you really have dreamed of. You absolutely deserve it, and your children absolutely deserve it. I look forward to getting to know you more, and I look forward to co-creating through the membership content. Have a beautiful day, and we'll see you on the next podcast.